Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode is the author of Cambridge Gothic, a fantasy YA series based in Cambridge, England. The third and latest book in the series, called Legacy of Shadows, came out in April this year.
They've also worked some rather big jobs in their business career, including CEO of Games Workshop. Now, they spin tales set in a university steeped in myth and legend. We'd like to warmly welcome Mark Wells.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, folks. How are you?
Very good.
Not too bad.
Good. It's
Well, I'm a bit worried about the sound quality here because I'm in the attic room, and it's chucking it down outside. So if you get a background thrum, it's not a drum roll. It's just the rain on the tiles.
Oh no, it's just the ASMR edition of the podcast now, isn't it? Lovely free rain sounds. There's no copyright on
go.
them. Love that.
It's free rain
Fantastic.
sounds just static. Is that what that is? So, what does Cambridge Gothic mean to you?
Well, it was when I decided I was going to write a book. I wanted to base it here in Cambridge because I've been a student here many years ago, and I read law and hated it, absolutely hated it. And I spent more time in Heffer's children's bookshop than I did in the law library. But while I was wandering back through the courts, I would often look skyward towards the gargoyles, and I always thought, what a great setting for a fantasy series. And almost 40 years later, I actually sort of put pen to paper and had a go at writing it. And I thought Cambridge Gothic was the sort of feel of it, sort of the Gothic architecture, but also the sort of Bram Stokerish feel to some of the story. I thought it would be a good series title for the books I wanted to write.
I think it's exciting.
I make you absolutely right about Cambridge having that fantastical feeling. The building is covered in statues. That weird. I mean, if you've never been there, guys, there's a clock. Apparently, there is a sort of big robot grasshopper walking a wheel in a circle.
Yeah,
and it also is the only place I've ever been with enough open and running pubs to actually support a sort of a series of adventurers meeting up in pubs all over the place to start their journeys. So
it's very much, it definitely has that sort of innkeeper's tales sort of feel to it. And yeah, you could if you did a pub crawl, you'd have to have a fair amount of stamina because there's scores of them.
And indeed we have, because Nico and I both went to uni in the city, so
we did the King Street run.
King Street run a few times. Yeah, that was good.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was a time. It was a time. Did you know that just a little bit of Cambridge background here? This year, that all of the non-Green King pubs in Cambridge, all of them got into the campaign for Real Ale's top pubs in the country.
Oh
All
wow!
of them. That is incredible.
It's just phenomenal. It's such a pub city.
Yeah.
It's sort of not really a city, is it? It's quite small, but oh well, I think that's probably quite enough Cambridge stuff, at least for the moment, from me, because we'll get some more Cambridge stuff from our guest in a minute. But let's have some stories. Regular listeners know how it goes, but for those of you joining for the first time, there'll be 3 stories told in this episode, all of them being written to the same shared prompt. This week, the prompt is The Chill. Nico, get cold.
The Chill. Oh, please, come in. Garth felt himself bow reflexively. It was an uncomfortable move in more ways than one. Zoe just smiled at him and stepped across the threshold, thus marking the furthest along the relationship spectrum Garth had ever been with a human woman. It wasn't that he'd not tried. If anything, it could be argued that his efforts had been astonishingly thorough, if entirely misguided. His manners kicked in, and a reach was made for Zoe's jacket. There was no resistance. As he slid the coat off of her bare shoulders, he tried to stop his brain and cock from simultaneously overheating as they warred to take control of the blood supply. A compromise was reached, unfortunately resulting in the loss of the speech centre in the deal. Shoes off of in the house. It wasn't his rule, but Mum's carpet had better be pristine when she got home later. He'd had a quiet word with Dad early in the week. In exchange for doing the washing up for 2 weeks, his worst nemesis, both parents had gone out for a cinema date, a spot of dinner, and likely an evening closing out in the pub. There was a chance, and not a slight one, that it might just end up as a night in the pub. They did chips, after all. "Oh yeah, of course, sorry, so rude of me." Zoe began to slip off her shoes. This was a bargaining chip that had not been accounted for, and as her feet became exposed, a large neon sign in the brain that read "Internet Pornography" fled to life, and all control was relinquished to the nether regions. Now barefooted, the sucklessness only exacerbating the situation, Zoe locked eyes with Garth. She smiled. He was close to being able to send her home for the night already. Some had definitely leaked out. "So will we, upstairs, or—" The question hung in the air for a moment, as Garth tried to grapple with it. She had her naked feet out, and was asking about going upstairs. The brain wrested control back from the knob just long enough for an arm to be thrown wide, indicating the living room. No words came with it, but Zoe took its meaning and ducked in under his hand. Sweat. Sweat was becoming an issue already. Could he get away with changing his top? But the Reddit thread he'd been on earlier told him that women love musk. They'd been trying to cultivate this masculine reek all afternoon. It would be a shame to waste it now. He took a deep breath before following into the living room. A question prepared. "You want drink, tea or something?" He tried to sound nonchalant, as though he often offered beautiful women cups of tea in his house. He pointed with some aggression at the table, where bowls of crisps and a freshly opened pack of party rings sat. "Snack as well. Have whatever you like." He had meant to say, "Please, help yourself." Why hadn't he just said, "Help yourself"? He prided himself on being a well-spoken and intelligent gentleman. Just yesterday, an online IQ test had clocked him at 135. So why was his brain currently ringing like a well-used sponge? "Oh, did you pour this out for me? That is so sweet." Delicately, a cheese-flavoured corn ball snack was lifted by a pair of feminine fingers and popped into Zoe's mouth. It crunched delightfully. "Balls in mouth! Balls in mouth!" Garth's brain was screaming some kind of klaxon warning. Tasty." She smiled brightly at him. "Oh, I'd love a tea. Sweet, please. 3 sugars?" She seized the remote up from among the snacks and pointed it at the TV. "Netflix open already?" She winked at Garth. "You're naughty, aren't you? I know about Netflix and chill, you bad boy. You better get me that tea. Don't want me to be dry, do you?" Garth came. It was not the full-force, stomach-cramping, moan-dragging orgasm he was hoping for, but some potential baby Garths were oozing into his boxers. Despite the tactical pre-date me time he'd taken, as per YouTube's instructions, it had happened. In a panic, he walked into the kitchen without a word, put the kettle on to boil, and got rid of his soiled underpants. It wasn't until he stood, bare-legged and free-balled in the kitchen, that he realised the situation he'd put himself in. He had to put his trews back on and get back out there commando. When he returned, he had 2 cups of tea in hand. He'd graciously given Zoe the best mug, the black one with "Ask me about my katana mastery" written on it. That meant, however, he was drinking from Mum's Gardener's World mug. Not ideal. That might be seen as a femme trait. Zoe was flicking through the options on the streaming service. "I would get analysis paralysis on this bit, I can watch anything, but none of it's, calling to me. Do you get me?" Garth grunted and sat down next to her on the sofa, refusing to let her out of his eyeline for even a moment. He placed her tea before her and sipped his own. It was too hot. He made a noise, somewhere between a squawk and an oink. Zoe turned wide-eyed. Oh, babe, did you burn yourself? Oh, no. She leaned in close to look at his lips. Will you look okay? Let me be sure. With that, she planted a small kiss on his lips. It nearly happened again. She giggled and turned back to the TV. Garth managed some words at last. I've never met anyone like you. It was a bit simpy, he thought, but also true. Zoe laughed. The laugh was too intense. Yeah, I know that. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, I don't reckon. She popped another cheese ball into her mouth. These are so Moorish. You are a virgin, aren't you? Garth swallowed. He was, but that was not what you told girls like this. Double your body count, then add a 0. It will assert dominance. He had not thought about the fact that anything times 0 was still in fact 0. Don't worry, I know you are. It's pretty easy to tell. Of course, sometimes people are just incels and they've had one, so it's a waste of an evening, but what can you do? She hadn't looked away from the Netflix scrolling. Films and TV shows flashed past in a seemingly endless blur. Honestly, I was so surprised when you swiped right on me. I suppose it's the picture with my tits all pushed together. Did you read the profile? She flashed a glance. Yeah, Garth managed, without changing the shape of his gaping mouth. Right, amazing. What did it say? She seized up the still hot tea and slurped the cup down in a single gulp. Generous sugars, nice. Well, go on. It said... The penis had relinquished all power to the brain. This was going south, or north from its perspective. It said you had a taste for inexperienced men and that you were a demon. Zoe laughed. Yeah, it did. And what did you think that meant? Like a demon in the sack. A good... He swallowed. Dagger. Zoe snorted derisively and clicked faster. The TV was just a cycling wheel of unreadable colours now. Oh, you are too cute. No, Garth. It's getting harder and harder to find virgins of age now. See, kids are no good. It's like eating unripened fruit. You can, but it's never as good, right? Then, of course, you get beyond that, and wouldn't you know it, the world is hornier than it's ever been. I blame the internet, of course, you know? She turned to look at him again. He didn't move a millimetre. You know, she agreed with herself on his behalf. So I realised that we should start using that. Now, all these online dating apps, I'm very selective, looking for guys just like you. 35. 35 is a good one. You have a gold mind. You, my friend, are going to be delicious. Garth thought about running, or screaming, or throwing his tea at the womanly figure on the sofa. As it spoke, it seemed to grow larger and darker, almost like all light from the room was being pulled into it. What? What are you? She turned to look at him fully, the kaleidoscopic Netflix screen making her face flicker in the dark light. It seemed strange and misshapen. I'm what you've always wanted, Garth. A woman who's willing to take you inside her. Suddenly the light seemed to freeze, and soft cello music began to play. Ooh, Downton Abbey! I could go for that. Were the last words Garth ever heard.
That was absolutely hilarious.
Fantastic.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Just so I actually laughed for a solid 2 minutes after you went. Garth came. Like,
Yeah.
I absolutely lost it. What a ridiculous story, but so far
Yeah.
and really, really well structured. It was so good. I really enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, that horrible. I mean, the concept of an incel is just already really disquieting.
Yeah.
but that you just captured it with the with the Reddit and describing things as stuff like feminine fingers and femme traits, these masculine reek, that kind of thing. Ugh, an online IQ test.
I'm just fascinated by it. This whole subsection of society who think that they can get all the experience and knowledge they need from other people who don't have that experience and knowledge on the internet. What a fantastic thing to build a character around.
Yeah, absolutely. A good chugger. Jesus Christ.
Also, say when I read it to my partner before before we came on, just as we often do, to get is this okay? And as you say, you started laughing when I said Garth came. She went, "What?" So I knew it was good.
Totally agree. I think one of the things I liked about it was the fact that suddenly, it started as like it was comedic at the beginning, but then you just suddenly certain words got dropped in, like you say. When she asked about "You are a virgin, aren't you?" and then I thought, "Oh God, here we go," and it was just really nice to suddenly find that actually he was completely losing control of the whole situation. I mean, not that he was particularly in control of it, but I think as a reader or listener, I thought it was just great the way he just sucked us in. Because it was, you were smiling, and then you were starting to feel really uncomfortable that you were smiling.
Yeah, I'm glad that works.
It's uncomfortability. Sorry, just before we carry on from that just from an audience perspective, you've absolutely nailed that, Mark. Like, it's really uncomfortable to listen to, whilst also being very funny, and then you realise that maybe you shouldn't have been laughing.
Yeah.
I think that's where the rug pull works. I think because it's awkward to listen to at the beginning anyway, because you're thinking, oh God, this guy's unbearable. Oh no. So when it shifts into being sort of physically uncomfortable in that space, you're already ready for it.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. There was a line very near the start where you said something along the lines of, "This was the furthest he'd ever been with a human woman,"
Yes.
and so at that point, I was like, "Oh, it's a monster story, and the main character is the monster." And then then it revealed that the monster you were describing was an incel. It's horrible. But I thought there were also like some really nice bits of just everyday observation. I would potentially say quite British observations. Things like it might just turn into a night down the pub. They did chips after all.
Yeah.
And like having the best mug as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Gardener's World.
Gardener's World. Yeah, it was really, because it could have been quite like flat and obscene, and it wasn't. You brought it to life. Like, you made it feel like it was actually happening in the world.
I think the most British thing in this is the freshly opened packet of party rings on the table.
Yes.
That's
What are they for, by the way? Are they building material?
They're delicious. How dare you?
They are not delicious. They are awful. They appear to have some kind of plastic paste on top of them.
I can't believe. How could you say such a thing? You tell me Jammy Dodgers aren't good next.
No, Jammy Dodgers are okay, actually. I quite like Jammy Dodgers.
All right, okay. We don't.
I also like that you actually nailed the dialogue. I thought the dialogue went really well. I mean, I think you were dropping clues all the way through, which you only realised afterwards. So I've never met anyone like you. When he says that, I mean, later on you think, no, he certainly hasn't met anyone like her, and is never going to again. So it was nice, actually, afterwards, you sort of have that retrospective. If I was reading the book, I'd love to read it again, to look at all the clues, all the little cues you'd put in there to set us up for the gag, which was great.
You just got a whole bunch of people to skip back about 12 minutes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, even in the first paragraph or two, when she's invited in.
Yes.
Like, I think that it was masterful. It was very well done. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you ever so much. I was glad. I haven't written comedy for a while because I don't want it to become a crutch, because it is something that I really enjoy doing and I find a lot easier than writing serious stories. But when I read the prompt, my brain just kept saying Netflix and chill, and I was like, okay, well, what can I do with that? What can I make out of it?
Thanks, brain.
And then he just comes in the living room. Yeah, that's good. I'll write that down.
Write that down. That's a great idea. Well, Mark, do you reckon you're up for going next?
So follow that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. That's great.
You're very welcome.
He does it to me every week.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Okay, so let's see how this one goes then. So the chill. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, you know. Of course, a lot of people ignore it, put it down to a sudden draft or the first symptom of a winter cold. Some even blame it on an unknown trespasser walking over their grave, which would be easy to dismiss as an old wives' tale. But on this occasion, the latter explanation was closer to the truth. It occurred in my final year at college, which was eventful in many ways, not least that I survived a tumultuous May ball largely intact. Indeed, I actually managed to graduate after 3 years of Arc and Anth, or AA as we like to call it. A rather apt acronym given the amount of Pims consumed at our post-exam garden party. Not that alcohol can explain what happened to me that evening. Indeed, I was remarkably sober after seeing off my friends, Ying and Trevor, at the station. Their holiday plans sounded a good deal more exciting than mine. Being dumped by a girlfriend tends to do that to one's social life. So it was with a deflated but sober mind that I returned to college to gather my thoughts and possessions for what looked like an interminably long vacation with overbearing parents and underwhelming prospects. With everyone gone but the porters and retired fellows, I passed through St John's College First Court without meeting a soul. Even the kitchens were silent as I made my way through the passageway, past the Great Hall, into the 16th century splendour of Second Court. My home for the past year, I gazed around at the leaded windows, their darkened panes, as empty as I felt. The only light in the square came from my turreted staircase, a sentinel to the last student remaining at the end of another academic year, or so I thought. Approaching O's staircase, I paused at the room index inside the archway. Giles Chamberlain, hand-painted against my room number, was still there for now. Ah, well, I thought, and was about to slide the indicator to in for what I expected to be the last time, when I noticed a patina of white dust covering the weathered oak. Odd. The last time I checked, the fellow resident in O1 was sniffing Victorian snuff rather than 21st century coke. But running a finger over the surface, I realised it wasn't powder at all. It was frost, the tiny crystals forming a thin layer over the framed sign. And when I tried sliding the wooden room indicator across, it remained stubbornly at out. What the hell? I muttered, but stopped on seeing my breath mist before me. That was when I felt it, a sliver of ice running down my spine. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the court was deserted. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling I was no longer alone. As if to confirm this, a breath of air, too light to be called a breeze, wafted over my skin, the hairs rising at its cold caress. There was no doubting its source. It was coming from the staircase, which I saw now was dusted with the same crystalline sheen as the sign. Then, remembering the dry ice machines from the ball, I smiled. Very funny, I murmured. It would be just like Ying to leave such a device running at the top of the stairs, a final gotcha after all I'd put them through in May week. Though the live swan in her bathroom would take some topping. I was still grinning as I entered the staircase, which already felt like a walk-in fridge. I know, because I'd raided the college kitchen on more than one occasion. I mean, where else can a chap get ice after midnight? Anyway, the air became frostier the higher I climbed, so much so that I avoided touching the metal banister. My room was on the top floor, but the spiral staircase continued up past my landing to a circular attic beneath the tower's rafters. Whatever was causing the Arctic temperatures had to be up there, because the cold was now so intense it was becoming painful to breathe. I'd like to say it was this that caused me to slow. But that wasn't the case. It was a creeping sense of foreboding that grew with every step, so that I found myself stopping before reaching the top and peering around the final turn. He sat at the top of the stairs, his pale form hunched over a leather-bound book that was resting on his knees. Though he only wore a nightshirt, he was wrapped in a sheet, the translucent folds hanging from his shoulders like a funeral shroud. This spectral impression was reinforced by the pallor of the face half hidden between a mop of white hair. I stood there, frozen in more ways than one. The figure, too, remained motionless, either oblivious or indifferent to my presence. In the end, I decided that someone had to break the ice, so to speak, and mustering what circulation I could to my lips, mumbled, "Good evening." The head lifted at once, revealing a pair of wide eyes, their dark pupils staring at me with an intensity that held me spellbound. How long this lasted, I couldn't be sure, but under his unflinching scrutiny, I felt as transparent as my examiner. Eventually, though, his frown eased and the pale lips parted. "Finally," he said. Setting the book aside, he rose from his reading spot and descended towards me. Too startled and stiff with cold to back away, I grabbed the banister, gasping at the ice burn of bare metal. But this was nothing compared to the shock I felt as the apparition first touched and then passed through me. As my friends will tell you, it's rare for me to be lost for words, but to this day I struggle to describe the sensation of that lifeless form entering and leaving my body. Had it lingered even for a moment, well, I shudder to think what would have happened to my mind, let alone my body. Even after it had gone, it took some time for the dreadful sensation to ease. Gradually, though, warmth returned to the stairwell and to my limbs. Only then, as I took in my surroundings, did I notice the book. It lay on the top step, the title page open where its reader had left it. Monus Hieroglyphica by Johannes D. It was a rare first edition, of that I had no doubt, but the chill I felt at that moment wasn't from discovering the mystical tome of John Dee, Renaissance magus and court astrologer to Elizabeth I. It was from the owner's nameplate, just visible under an icy handprint. The Very Reverend James Wood, Master of St. John's College and Dean of Ely, bequeathed by his will to his initiate, Giles Chamberlain, in the year of our Lord 1839. Oh, crap, I muttered, realizing that an arcane baton, however belatedly, had been well and truly passed.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed that, my friend. Thank you.
You have the Cambridge vibe so down, by the way.
Absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I mean, putting aside the fact that there were so many ice and cold puns in there.
Yeah.
I was just enjoying it. By the end, I was like, "Come on, you've got more. You've got more in the chamber. I can feel it." But yeah, even just the that internal monologue at the beginning, talking about how things had been, and having gone to the Maybore and how much Pims they'd consumed, and I was immediately back in Cambridge. It just had that. I have so many friends who would talk in exactly that way. You've absolutely captured that character.
Yeah, I've been so he's Giles is one of the characters from the main series, and my main series I've written in the third person. My debut novel was the first book in that series, College of Shadows, and I wasn't confident writing in the first person, so I wrote in the third person, and it's a bit like Stranger Things meets Cambridge University, really. And so I've got four main characters, and two freshers, Giles, who's a third year, and a professor, and a host of minor characters. And writing the third person has been great in sort of like getting my head around what they're all like. But when I finished the trilogy, I thought the next book I'd write, I'd take one of the characters and write it in the first person to give people a chance to sort of find out a bit more about him. So when you approached me and said, do you fancy doing a short story? I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to practice. And so I just took Giles and thought I'd try and get inside his head a bit and see what it'd be like for him to be left after all the others have gone away for the vacation. And the staircase that he lives in is actually my old staircase when I was a student, and it is a haunted staircase. And the guy that the ghost that allegedly lives there is this chap James Wood, and he appears at the top of the stairs with his feet in a bucket of straw, wrapped in a blanket, and reading by candlelight because he was too poor to afford his own candles. So he used to live in the top of the staircases because the college paid for the candles to light the staircases, sort of thing. So that was the idea for the chill, really. And I thought it gives me a good opportunity just to see what Giles would do if he came across the college ghost.
It's lovely. I think it's also just wonderfully read. Like your cadence really captured the different moods of both the character and also the setting. It's very good. That's I wrote down because it really struck with me that this character's outlook was so strong, and I think Nico already mentioned it. The way that you captured Giles, you have this, like in the first person, you have this. But for me, I wrote down just that they were sort of almost like bulletproof in their bravery, and it felt like they're very much wearing the armor of their youth. And I thought that was particularly interesting because obviously you are sort of typically aiming for more of a YA audience. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely right.
And I feel like when I was of age to be for this stuff to be aimed at me, that would have really resonated with me. Just be like, oh yeah, why wouldn't you just do that? Why wouldn't you just crack a joke at that point? Whereas as you get older, you're like, oh god, run!
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
I believe that's the distinction between wisdom and intelligence, isn't it? This character is probably very intelligent, but yeah, I'll get involved in this. Some
It's
ice,
funny,
why not?
I get the feedback I sort of tend to get from because there's an awful lot of my readers actually. They're certainly not teenagers or students. I get a lot of readers from all over the world who sort of like really got involved in the series, and they get so frustrated with some of my characters, just as the fellows get frustrated with the students. It's that sort of that sort of generational gap, which is, why does Giles do that, or what is Annabelle thinking, or God, Nick, can't you just sort yourself out, sort of thing. And that's the sort of feedback I get. So it's nice to get that feedback from that mature audience, because they've obviously really got into the characters to sort of give me that that sort of like emotional reaction to what they do in the stories, which of course I love doing to the characters, which is great.
It's lovely.
It must be fantastic.
Yeah, I was just exactly the same thing. Must be fantastic to get that kind of feedback. The bit that really worked for me in the story was this moment of like finding the fantastical, because you were already describing what to most people would be another world, this kind of opulent location with all of the history and the architecture and just and culture happening that's just imbued in every little detail, like the hand painted sign on the door, for example. But that moment of finding the fantastical in it just then takes it up another notch, doesn't it? Seeing that first glimmering of the frost and initially thinking that it was some fellow doing coke, but actually it's some manner of horrible magic happening. That really struck a chord for me. It felt very much like when I was a kid and I read something like Harry Potter, and just it pressed the same button, not in the same way, and definitely not in the same style or anything like that, but just you found that button, and to be honest, I thought that button had long since atrophied. So well done, thank you.
Thanks.
Really enjoyed it. And also I would say that having the character, the inciting emotional incident, be the character coming off a breakup is quite an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because it puts you in a kind of odd, skewed worldview when that kind of thing happens to you, I think. So
especially talking about these things like just the bulletproof bravery, but sometimes you do just feel self-destructive after a breakup, or
true.
but maybe you're more open to new experiences because you're not thinking about someone else, or because you are thinking about someone else but not as a lover anymore. And yeah, it's a good setting for a character, especially because maybe there are some people who can't, but most people will relate to that. And it does just put you into a headspace immediately of, oh God, I remember being at university and having a breakup and thinking it was the end of the entire world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you just, when you think back to those years, and you sort of leave school thinking, you're sort of the big person on campus, aren't you, at school? And then you go to university and you do daft things, really daft things. And you can't
Yeah.
quite believe when you look back how daft you were. You thought you were so mature at school, but boy, you're a complete idiot when you went to university. And I think what I've tried to do with it is to sort of get that, get across really that doesn't matter, like you said earlier so rightly, we have an awful lot of highly intelligent people at places like Cambridge who do stupid things, and the stupid things is actually what creates the drama, which is great fun.
Yeah. I mean, by the time this episode comes out, she'll be my wife, but my partner has. She said, "Oh, I wish we'd met when we were at university," and I always say, "I'm really glad we didn't."
Oh yeah, that would be
Because
insane.
you'd have hated me.
I know. Yeah, so I did meet my wife at university, so she's a very long-suffering soul. So yeah.
Very good.
I
Yes.
think it's
Yeah.
time to well, let's in honor of the thing, let's make it a Trinity college, perhaps.
It's
You're
laboured,
up,
but
and
I'll take it.
like a birthing ward, my friend.
Oh, come on. The chill. Charlie pushed the wet handle gently and slid the unlocked patio door open. Streetlights shone through the curtainless windows of the bungalow, and Charlie used them to get his bearings. He didn't feel excited or even nervous. There was nothing in him but a cold sense of wrongness. That empty space where emotions used to roil meant everything to him now. He called it the chill, and intended to do whatever it took to get rid of it, to feel something again. It might have helped matters if he knew what he was looking for, but he knew it had to be there somewhere. The stranger had kissed him at 2 a.m. in Razors a week ago, sucking dryly on him as he did so. His mouth had tasted like rancid jam. Charlie, reacting poorly after 3 drinks and an edible, had thumped the man and called him something he wasn't proud of. Then next morning he had woken up with the chill, and soon after that, the plan had formed in his mind. Charlie crept on, stepping through the Spartan living room. The whole place smelled of sulphur and seemed unlived in, but oddly clean. He had only his imagination to go by, but he suspected he would know the object. Charlie padded past what looked like a kitchen and tried the first door he came to in the hallway, opening it slowly. The smell grew worse immediately, and he peered into the darkness. Unwilling to waste time, he quickly pointed his phone into the room and flicked the torch on. The thing was sleeping on a mattress in there. Charlie watched its chest expanding and contracting, a mimicry of breath. It looked like a man, a 40-something, bald, blind man, but Charlie knew it was something else entirely. He cast about the room, looking for a piece of furniture or a curio that might hold what he was looking for, but like the living room, the bedroom was mostly bare. Charlie gently closed the door and moved on. The spare room, hallway, and utility room all returned nothing as well. The one exception was the spotless bathroom, where a jar of jam with a toothbrush stuck in it sat beneath the medicine cabinet. Charlie went on to ransack the cupboards of the kitchen, but there was nothing there. Confusingly, the refrigerator was well stocked, but when Charlie looked closely, he saw that it was all fake. The fruit and veg were of that plastic kind hardware stores use to model kitchens. The countertop held a coffee machine and a knife block. He pulled the largest chef's knife from it and wondered if what he sought was inside the thing itself. A small beep from the coffee machine preluded the shattering of the silence. The automated grinder started up and filled the kitchen with noise. Charlie checked his phone and wondered why the thing had set it to go off at midnight. Then he saw it, noiselessly walking right past him. It placed a mug under the spout of the coffee machine. It didn't seem to react to him, as though it were blind to him now there was nothing inside. Charlie peered at what was coming out of the spout. It was grey, almost silken, and filled with the shifting strands of light. He knew what to do. Charlie plunged the knife into the thing's back twice, and left it stuck in there on the third strike. It fell awkwardly, and writhed on the floor, trying for a moment to clutch at the blade in its back, before its movements stilled. He snatched up the mug and drank the fluid. It glugged viscously in his throat, not wanting to be swallowed, but he forced it down. Colour came back into the world. Charlie felt the warmth of rage and elation melt into him, eradicating that chill at his core. Everything he'd lost rushed back in. Charlie could feel it all again. The grin died on his face when he looked down at the corpse he had made. What if he'd imagined it, and had some sort of psychotic break? Now he'd killed someone, not a thing, a real person. Oh no, 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 no. As he watched, head held in his hands, the thing twitched. The blade slid out of it as though it were being pushed from the inside. Charlie felt cold again, but this time it was from the icy swell of fear in his belly. The thing got to its feet and Charlie backed away. No! It began to chase him. Charlie turned and ran. No! He hit the patio door at a run, and the heavy glass shattered into him as he fell through it. No! Charlie crawled towards the garden gate he'd entered through. Terror and pain vied for control within him, one telling him to run, the other to hide. The thing stepped on his ankle and rolled him over with a kick. As he gasped for breath, he stared up into its pale eyes. They glinted in the low light as the thing looked at him dispassionately. Then it knelt and lowered its face towards his. The smell of sulphur filled Charlie's nose. When its lips locked onto his, Charlie knew what it was that he'd tasted that night. The thing tasted of death.
Well, sir. What the fuck was that?
That was dark.
I was going for dark. I potentially may have set myself a bit too much of a challenge here, so I'd be interested to know what you guys think of that.
Well, it was just a horror. It was one of those creeping horrors at the beginning, and then as the horror sort of manifested itself, it was really like, oh god, I wanted to get out of the kitchen. It was just not a nice place to be. And then when he stirred, when the thing stirred, I would have run screaming from the room too. Absolutely.
You hit one of my favourite horror movie notes that you get in quite a lot of things. Like you get it in stuff like Jurassic Park, when they don't move, so the T-Rex can't. But it's the monster sort of padding past. That always really works for me, and it just moving to the coffee machine and wanting to pick up this mug of whatever it was and drink it, while Charlie is just kind of frozen there with a knife in hand, and not knowing if he's going to act. Like, is he going to break? Is he going to fight? Like, where is the character at? I loved that moment because, like I say, it's one of my favorite horror tropes.
Oh, thanks. I think the thing that I was battling with a bit here was that I wanted to try and show what happens when somebody has their emotions removed. Like, maybe thinking of it through like a lens of depression or something like that, where just the world feels muted. And then they suddenly sort of get it back, and they've been acting in a world that has a different set of rules because they didn't have emotions.
Yes.
Like, the way that he like just flicks his torch on to see if they're in there, because he doesn't actually have any fear in like the first half of the story. There's no, he's just walking through someone's house that he should be terrified of. But it's actually really hard to write like a third-person limited kind of thing to somebody that doesn't have any emotions or is acting as though they don't.
Yeah, without being really heavy-handed and being like, Charlie felt nothing because he had no emotion.
Exactly. And I sort of found myself being like, and then this happened. Charlie did this, because he's not actually taking anything in. He's not processing anything emotionally. So it's difficult to put any stamp on it. So I tried to backload that after he gets whatever it is back.
But I think that works because it makes it feel like a flood when it comes back in.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree with you.
Like completely overwhelming for him and for the reader. This kind of like that switch goes and you go, yeah, he's actually in there with a monster. Fucking get out. Like there's there isn't even time to process it because like would happen, he just goes into panic. I will also say, how did we both from the chill get some kind of demon thing going on?
So we had a demon in yours, we had a ghost ghost in Mark's, and we had some kind of soul-sucking wraith in mine.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
I think it's the consonant the chill. I think it has. It's a bit like the thing. You know, it's one of those words that just gives you that sort of like it immediately takes you to a dark place. It's this sort of unique. The article gives you a sort of a sense that there is something there, and there's something about it's a really I think it's a very interesting word when you look at titles of books, and sometimes the word "the" is lost in the title of the book. In other times, it's absolutely the reason why the title grips you.
Yeah.
The one that jumped into my head when you said that was the Necronomicon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's like there is only one of these.
Or I'd say, like at the other end of that spectrum is the Lord of the Rings. Like it doesn't. I feel like that the has kind of faded into almost obscurity now, where we would just say Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it is the Lord of the Rings, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. But when you
actually,
you just say LOTR, don't you? Like it's
I'm
when you're
afraid.
writing it out.
Telota.
But it's interesting because I think what works so well in the story for me is that as he said when he drank the sort of the liquid and the color came back into your writing. I mean, the color came back into his life, but also the color came back into your writing, and therefore actually it really, you really felt him coming alive because the sort of the dial, the actual the vocabulary came alive, and the it was a very different feel once he'd taken the liquid inside, and like you say, that brought all his emotions back as well. So I think it was really clever writing the way actually the emotions tied in with the words, so that actually his flight was it was very much a sort of like a scream type flight. Your visceral color escape feeling in the words actually is how it was conveyed. Whereas the early part of the story, where you're not quite sure what's going on, is very grey and dark and sort of like obscured. But later on, it just becomes vivid and visceral.
I think, in a way, what that reminds me of is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
The that like you're spending the whole thing going, isn't this a Tarantino movie?
Yeah.
And we even heard about some people, Ben and I, when he showed it to me for the first time, who had said, "Well, what's the point of it? It's not a Tarantino movie. There's barely any violence." I said, "Well, when did you leave?" I said, "Oh, it's like Brad Pitt walked off to have a joint or something," and I was like, "I'm bored of this." So like moments before the film explodes into
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it's that same kind of thing that like slow build things are going, and then all of a sudden, bam! It kicks into that full pelt. Someone running through a glass wall, essentially.
I was going to say, she runs through a glass door, doesn't she? In that sequence into the pool.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that. Well, yeah, I'll take the comparison. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very nerve-wracking thing to do because deliberately making your writing feel quite dead for half, for half of not very many words, is a bit of an odd move, I think. But I think it's quite important in a way because I feel like it's very difficult to describe depression. In a way that isn't heavy-handed. So maybe just taking the color out of the language that you're writing around it works. I don't know. Sort of playing with something for a toolbox, I think, there for me.
Yeah, good. Well, I thought it worked really well. It was, that monochrome opening still had me gripped because I was trying to work out what was going on. So, like you say, I think it worked very well.
The clever use of the word "it" in the first part. I'm looking for it. It's like, looking for what? What? Tell me, God damn it! I will say before we wrap up this first episode, I would have you back on board every time, Mark, just to do a little breakdown for us on why we reacted certain ways to prompts, because we've been asking each other this question for years now, and you are the first person to say, well, I think it's because of the use of the word "the." And so if we can get you in as a consultant of some kind, I think that'd be great.
No, you did hit the nail on the head almost immediately. So that is it's pretty impressive.
Me just going, yeah, that.
For the folks listening, could you let them know where they could keep up with you and your writing, where they can buy any of the books of the trilogy so far?
Yeah, so I'm self-published, so I publish it all on Amazon. So I've gone to Amazon exclusive, and the series is called Cambridge Gothic, and I write under my own name, Mark Wells. But my website, I've got a website, marknwells.com, and on that, I've actually, one of the things I do. We're going to talk about the writing process in the second interview, I think, but one of the things I do between drafts of my main novels, I tend to write short stories, and I typically will pick a minor character from the main novel and write a short story about them to give me a chance to understand them a bit more as a character, but also some nice free content to give my readers. So what I tend to do is I tend to make those short stories available as free downloads from my website. So if you're not sure about Cambridge Gothic as an idea, then you can go to my website and just download my collection of short stories, and that will give you more of a flavour of the sort of writing I do.
That's a great thing to be doing. What a great idea.
We can't do better than free, gang. You better get over there.
And are there any socials that they should follow you on? Like I think you're on Instagram.
Yeah, I do Facebook and Instagram. But actually, if I'm honest, just over a year ago, I tried going on Book Talk, and it's just sort of exploded for me, Book Talk. Or TikTok for authors, basically. And so actually, a lot of I post every day, at least once a day, on TikTok something, because I have this amazing environment I write my books in, Cambridge. So if I'm walking through Cambridge, I tend to sort of take photographs or videos of stuff, and then I've always got content each night to post up on TikTok, and I sort of like then weave in, what's happening in the books to actually the real locations in Cambridge too. So if you want to sort of get a visual flavour of what the books are like, then yeah, just follow me on TikTok, and I think it's Mark Wells Author.
Wonderful. I have seen a couple of your videos. They're really transporting, because it is just an amazing location. So totally great move to do that, I think.
Great, good.
Even actually, if you just looking, I know we just spoke about TikTok, but I was just looking at your Instagram whilst we were doing that, and you actually have a picture of the grasshopper clock.
Yes.
You have a video on there, right in the top 6. So
yeah,
it's Cambridge is all over this. So definitely right. Everybody go and check it out, and then come back next time, and we'll be going through the interview questions with Mark and finding out the little eccentricities and idiosyncrasies of his writing. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?